For 29 years, as Emma Wilson, I felt perpetually overshadowed by my elder sister, Olivia. When Ryan asked me to marry him after 3 wonderful years together, it finally felt like something truly belonged to me, something to celebrate solely for ourselves. Then came our engagement celebration. Olivia took the microphone, announced her pregnancy, and with that familiar, knowing grin, casually remarked, "Sorry, looks like I've stolen the show once more." Laughter rippled through the room. Ryan and I sat in stunned silence. But what transpired next fundamentally altered everything. Our response arrived enclosed in an envelope. When she received our save the date, her furious phone call signaled that I had finally reclaimed my agency. Before I delve into the complete narrative, tell me where you're tuning in from in the comments below. If you've ever experienced a family member consistently diverting attention, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. Believe me, you'll want to discover how this story concludes. Growing up, my identity was inextricably linked to Olivia's presence, living constantly within her shadow. My sister was precisely 2 years and 3 months my senior, yet the disparity in our parents' focus and affection felt exponentially larger than any calendar measurement. From our earliest years, Olivia effortlessly captivated everyone. She possessed natural charm, striking beauty, and achieved things with apparent ease. By the time we reached high school, the pattern was deeply ingrained. Olivia was the cherished, faultless prodigy, while I remained the afterthought. The runner-up, the child frequently compared with the refrain, "Emma, why can't you be more like your sister?" Our parents made little effort to conceal their favoritism. My mother would arrive an hour early for Olivia's dance recitals to secure prime seating, but frequently checked her watch during my piano performances. My father proudly displayed Olivia's cheerleading accolades in the main living area, while my academic commendations languished, forgotten in a drawer. It wasn't that they lacked love for me, it was simply that their love for her was more overt, more fervent, and showcased with greater pride. The pattern of Olivia appropriating my significant moments began early, solidifying into a painful predictability as we matured. When I graduated high school with distinction, my modest celebratory dinner somehow morphed into a congratulatory gathering for Olivia, who had just secured admission to her top choice university, the very institution that had waitlisted me months earlier. Upon landing my initial professional position after university, my parents barely acknowledged it. Olivia had just become engaged to her college boyfriend, Mark. Over time, I developed an emotional shield. I learned to withhold sharing positive developments with my family immediately, instead privately relishing my accomplishments before exposing them to the inevitable comparison. I cultivated greater self-reliance, becoming less reliant on familial validation, finding value in my own achievements rather than awaiting the parental approval that never quite materialized. Perhaps this is precisely why Ryan caught me so off guard when we met. He noticed me. He genuinely saw me in a manner my family never had. We connected at the marketing firm where we both worked. I in content strategy, he in graphic design. Our joint effort on a significant project led to extended coffee breaks, lunch hours filled with laughter, and eventually dinner dates where time seemed to vanish. With Ryan, there was no need to vie for attention or demonstrate my worth. He listened intently when I spoke, recalled specifics about my day, and championed my ideas, both professionally and personally. After 3 years, he proposed at the summit of Maple Ridge, our preferred hiking destination, where we'd spent countless Saturdays discussing everything from childhood aspirations to future plans. Against a backdrop of vibrant autumn foliage and a clear blue expanse, he knelt and pledged to spend his life truly seeing, hearing, and prioritizing me. For the first time, I felt anchored within my own narrative. Planning our wedding brought an unexpected surge of happiness. Each decision, the venue, colors, flowers, felt profoundly significant because they were ours. Ryan encouraged me to envision exactly what I desired, rather than automatically conforming to what might appease others. We resolved to announce our engagement at the next family gathering, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this news would elicit genuine celebration. My parents' reaction was predictably subdued. My mother's initial query concerned whether we had set a date, quickly followed by anxieties about venue availability and catering expenses. My father offered a perfunctory congratulations before returning to a work email on his phone. I had anticipated this, but Ryan's visible disappointment lent it a new sting. Olivia's response, however, initially seemed surprisingly sincere. She shrieked, hugged me tightly, and immediately asked to see the ring. She complimented Ryan's taste and suggested we begin a wedding Pinterest board together. I've navigated this entire planning process, she reminded me, gesturing to her own wedding band. I can help you steer clear of all the pitfalls I encountered. For a fleeting, hopeful moment, I wondered if my wedding might finally serve as a catalyst for us to connect as sisters, rather than perpetual rivals. With our engagement publicly shared, Ryan and I decided to host a more formal celebration at the Lakeview, an exquisite venue overlooking Milton Lake that had captured both our hearts. I immersed myself in the planning with unforeseen enthusiasm, determined to craft an evening that authentically reflected us as a couple. I chose a color palette of deep navy and silver, commissioned bespoke floral arrangements featuring white roses and blue hydrangeas, and spent hours curating the perfect soundtrack. The guest list comprised around 50 individuals, cherished close friends, respected colleagues, Ryan's incredibly warm and supportive family, and my own more complex relations. Every decision felt imbued with meaning, each choice a crucial building block in the foundation of our life together. Ryan's parents were incredibly supportive throughout this phase. His mother, Linda, called weekly simply to check if we required any assistance, and his father, Thomas, insisted on contributing financially despite our initial reluctance. We've been saving for this since Ryan was born, Thomas confided during a Sunday dinner at their home. We couldn't be happier about the person he's chosen. The stark contrast between their enthusiastic backing and my own family's lukewarm interest was palpable, though not unexpected. As preparations advanced, Olivia's initial helpfulness began to reveal cracks. What started as constructive advice gradually shifted into thinly veiled critique. Navy blue in July? That's an interesting selection, she'd comment with a raised eyebrow. Or, you're opting for a buffet? I assumed sit-down dinners were customary for engagement events. Each remark was carefully framed, with just enough apparent concern to sound helpful, rather than undermining, but the underlying pattern was unmistakable. When I showed her the invitation design Ryan and I had crafted together, she subtly frowned. It's nice, but wouldn't something more classic be preferable? I still have my stationer's details from my wedding. I surprised myself by standing firm. Ryan and I designed these together. They perfectly capture who we are, so these are what we're using. The slight widening of her eyes indicated she was unaccustomed to this more assertive version of me, one who didn't automatically yield to her opinions. Despite Olivia's subtle attempts to dominate, I made a conscious effort to include her appropriately. I asked her to give one of the toasts at the party, hoping that assigning her a defined role might satisfy her need for attention without allowing it to eclipse the entire event. I'd be honored, she replied, looking genuinely touched, which momentarily made me question if perhaps I had been too harsh in judging her motives. In the weeks that followed, I noticed Olivia becoming increasingly guarded. She would abruptly end phone conversations when I entered our parents' house, and twice I overheard her whispering conspiratorially with our mother, both falling silent upon noticing my presence. I speculated it was wedding-related. Perhaps they were coordinating a surprise bridal shower or bachelorette party. For once, I allowed myself to believe Olivia might actually be trying to offer support, rather than steal my thunder. The day of the engagement party dawned with perfect weather. sunny with a gentle breeze, as if nature itself approved of our union. I spent the morning at the salon, then met Ryan at the venue 2 hours early to oversee the final arrangements. Everything appeared even more beautiful than I had envisioned. The lake shimmering beyond expansive windows, tables adorned with floating candles and flower petals, a display featuring photographs chronicling Ryan and my journey together. For the first time in my life, everything felt perfectly aligned. Guests began arriving promptly at 6 offering warm congratulations and admiring the setting. Ryan's extended family arrived in a cheerful group, bringing beautifully wrapped gifts, despite our request on the invitations that none were needed. My father arrived precisely on time, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his seldom worn suit. My mother followed 20 minutes later, immediately pointing out a smudge on one of the windows. By 7, everyone had arrived except Olivia and Mark. As the catering manager approached me about postponing dinner service, I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanied any deviation from meticulously laid plans. Just as Ryan suggested we commence without them, Olivia made her entrance, radiating confidence in a form-fitting emerald dress, her husband Mark trailing a step behind. She offered no explanation for their tardiness, simply air-kissing my cheek and complimenting the cute decorations. Something about her demeanor put me on edge, a barely suppressed excitement that seemed disproportionate to the occasion. Still, I pushed the apprehension aside. Determined to savor the celebration Ryan and I had invested so much effort in creating. The engagement party was precisely as I had envisioned. Elegant yet welcoming, formal without being stiff. Soft illumination bathed the room in a warm glow, and the setting sun painted the lake in hues of orange and pink, visible through the windows. Caterers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and the background music, a carefully curated mix of jazz standards and acoustic covers of songs significant to us, created the perfect ambiance. I caught Ryan's eye across the room. He was conversing with colleagues from the firm, and the look of pure love and pride on his face made my heart swell. For perhaps the very first time, I felt completely present in a moment of joy, not anticipating something to go awry or someone to diminish my happiness. Following dinner, the scheduled toast commenced. Ryan's father spoke first, raising his glass to recount how Ryan had called him 5 times before proposing, so nervous about perfecting every detail that he'd misplaced the ring. Affectionate laughter filled the room as Thomas concluded with heartfelt words, welcoming me into their family. My father's toast was more concise, but surprisingly sincere, acknowledging that while he hadn't always been adept at demonstrating it, he was proud of the woman I had become and the partnership Ryan and I had built. My best friend Caroline spoke next, recounting how I had called her immediately after my first date with Ryan, already sensing something profoundly significant had begun. The toasts were drawing to a close when Olivia suddenly rose and moved towards the microphone positioned at the head table. This wasn't entirely unexpected. She was, after all, scheduled to make a toast. But something in her expression caused my stomach to clench. She tapped the microphone twice, an unnecessary action in the already hushed room, and smiled broadly. I know Emma asked me to say a few words about her and Ryan, and I will, she began. But first, Mark and I have our own exciting news to share. Complete silence descended upon the room, all eyes fixed on my sister. My hand instinctively found Ryan's beneath the table, gripping it tightly. "We're pregnant," Olivia announced, her free hand moving to rest on her still flat abdomen. "Baby Thompson will be joining the family in about 6 months." The room erupted in gasps and congratulations. I sat frozen, the words echoing in my head as if from a great distance. And then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months afterward. As the initial exclamations subsided, Olivia looked directly at me, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, Emma. Guess I stole the spotlight again." She delivered the line with a light, teasing inflection, inviting others to interpret it as good-natured sibling banter. And they did. Ripples of laughter spread through the room, guests smiling indulgently at what they perceived as sisterly inside humor. Everyone laughed except Ryan and me. I felt his hand tighten around mine as we exchanged a look of disbelief. In that brief, silent communication, I knew he understood precisely what had transpired and felt the same fusion of hurt and anger coursing through me. The atmosphere of the entire party shifted fundamentally in that instant. My mother rushed to embrace Olivia, tears streaming down her face as she exclaimed about becoming a grandmother. My father awkwardly patted Mark's shoulder, offering congratulations with more animation than he had displayed all evening. Guests who moments earlier had been focused on celebrating our engagement now clustered around my sister, inquiring about due dates, morning sickness, and gender preferences. Our engagement party had, in the space of mere seconds, transformed into Olivia's pregnancy announcement celebration. I maintained my composure through sheer force of will, plastering on a smile that felt fragile, ready to shatter. Ryan remained steadfastly by my side, occasionally whispering words of support or squeezing my hand as a reminder that I wasn't alone. But the emotional devastation was complete. As I watched my parents doting over Olivia, my mother already discussing nursery themes, my father offering financial advice about college savings, it felt as though I were 8 years old again, standing in the wings of the school auditorium while Olivia commanded center stage. Several guests, swept up in the excitement, seemed to forget entirely why they were gathered in the first place. Marjorie, my mother's oldest friend, walked directly past me to reach Olivia, gushing about how she had sensed a different glow about her upon arrival. My own boss, who had known me for 5 years, spent 10 minutes discussing pediatricians with Olivia, whom he had met precisely twice. Around 9:30, without any formal conclusion to the party we had meticulously planned and paid for, Ryan suggested we depart. No one noticed us collecting our belongings. No one saw us thank the catering manager and discreetly hand him an envelope containing his gratuity. No one watched as we walked out of our own engagement celebration, the centerpiece of our relationship milestone, now merely a picturesque backdrop for my sister's latest triumph. In the car, the careful composure I had maintained throughout the evening finally fractured. Tears flowed freely as Ryan navigated the dark roads towards our apartment, one hand on the wheel, the other clasping mine. "I can't believe she did that," I managed between sobs. "Actually, no, that's not true. I absolutely can believe she did that. What I can't believe is that I thought tonight might be different." Ryan's jaw was clenched, his usually gentle expression hardened with an anger I rarely witnessed. "That was calculated, Emma. The timing, the delivery, even that little spotlight comment. She knew exactly what she was doing." He was right, and hearing him validate my feelings only amplified them. This wasn't a case of me being overly sensitive or misinterpreting things, patterns my family had frequently accused me of. An objective witness had observed precisely what I had. "Your parents didn't even try to redirect attention back to us," Ryan continued, his voice quiet but intense. "It's like they completely forgot why everyone was there in the first place." That observation inflicted the deepest wound, because it confirmed what I had always suspected but tried to deny. My parents' behavior wasn't accidental oversight, but a deliberate choice. They consistently, actively, prioritized Olivia's moments over mine. Back at our apartment, we changed out of our formal attire and sat at our kitchen table with mugs of tea that grew cold as we talked. We dissected the evening from every perspective, moving from hurt to anger to a strange kind of clarity. "It's a pattern," I said finally, articulating the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. "And patterns don't change unless something forces them to change." Ryan nodded, adding, "And Olivia gets away with it because there have never been consequences. Why would she alter behavior that's consistently rewarded?" We eventually drifted off to sleep on the couch around 2 in the morning, emotionally drained. I expected at least a few text messages checking on our abrupt departure, but my phone remained silent throughout the night. The next morning brought a deluge of notifications, but none expressing concern about us. My mother had created a family group chat titled Baby Thompson Updates, featuring a sonogram picture. My father had texted separately, inquiring if we could reschedule our wedding planning discussion to the following month, since your sister needs support with her pregnancy right now. Various relatives and friends had sent messages gushing about Olivia's news, without a single mention of the engagement party or how it had concluded. It was the final confirmation that in my family's eyes, my milestones would always be secondary to any development in Olivia's life. The message that finally broke me arrived from my mother at 10:17 a.m. Emma, your sister's first trimester has been challenging, and she'll require family support in the coming months. Have you and Ryan considered postponing the wedding planning until after the baby arrives? It would mean so much to your sister not to feel rushed with all she's experiencing. The sheer audacity of suggesting I delay my wedding for a pregnancy that had been deliberately announced to overshadow my engagement rendered me speechless. I handed the phone to Ryan, who read it and set it down with deliberate care, as if suppressing the urge to hurl it across the room. This stops now, he declared, his voice calm but resolute. Our wedding is about us, not your sister, not your parents' preferences, not anyone else's convenience. It's time to take control of our own narrative. We spent the morning exploring options. The most obvious response would be direct confrontation, calling out Olivia's behavior and my parents' enabling of it. But years of navigating family dynamics had taught me that such confrontations invariably resulted in me being labeled overly sensitive or jealous. Another possibility was excluding Olivia from the wedding entirely, but that would likely lead to my parents refusing to attend as well. As we discussed, a different strategy began to emerge, one that would allow us to celebrate our relationship on our terms while simultaneously sending a clear message about boundaries. What if, Ryan suggested, we completely change the style of wedding we're having, something that would make it difficult or even impossible for Olivia to overshadow us again? The idea took root and blossomed as we explored it. We had originally envisioned a traditional local wedding with around 150 guests. What if, instead, we opted for a destination wedding, something intimate, with limited guest capacity and restrictions that would naturally exclude certain individuals, including perhaps a sister who would be 7 months pregnant by our preferred date? The more we discussed it, the more it felt right. We dedicated the afternoon to researching destination wedding locations, costs, and logistics. We calculated that with the savings from foregoing a large local reception, we could afford a beautiful ceremony in a stunning international setting. By dinner time, we had settled on Santorini, Greece, a place we had both dreamed of visiting, with its whitewashed buildings against the blue Mediterranean, offering a perfect backdrop for our vows. We contacted a wedding planner specializing in destination ceremonies, explaining our vision for an intimate gathering of no more than 30 people. When she inquired about our timeline, we were firm. We wanted to be married within 6 months, before Olivia's due date. The most deeply satisfying aspect of our plan was designing the save the dates. We collaborated with a graphic designer friend to create elegant cards that conveyed not just information, but a very specific message. I felt a complex mix of emotions as we finalized the wording. Sadness that family dynamics had necessitated such measures, but also a burgeoning sense of empowerment. For once, I was making choices based solely on what Ryan and I desired, not on accommodating my family's expectations or Olivia's perpetual need for the spotlight. As I clicked approve on the final design, I realized this was perhaps the first major decision of my adult life made entirely without considering how my family would react. The liberation inherent in that realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The save the date cards were truly works of art. Heavy cream cardstock with a translucent vellum overlay, embossed with a delicate watercolor illustration of Santorini's iconic blue domes and whitewashed buildings against a sunset sky. The wording, however, was the true masterpiece. After multiple drafts and meticulous consideration of every phrase, we settled on text that was both elegant and unmistakably clear in its intent. Emma Wilson and Ryan Campbell invite you to celebrate their love with an intimate destination wedding in Santorini, Greece, on January 15th. Due to venue restrictions and our desire for a private celebration, we've limited our guest list to 30 close friends and immediate family. No plus ones, no children or infants, permitted at any wedding events. While this may mean some loved ones cannot attend, we hope you understand this is our special day. Formal invitation to follow for those who can join our celebration. We included a personal note in each envelope, stating that we understood the financial and logistical challenges of attending a destination wedding, and that we would host a casual reception later in the year for those unable to make the journey. The subtext was crystal clear to anyone aware of the situation. Olivia, being 7 months pregnant by our wedding date, would not be able to fly to Greece. And even if she delivered early, the strict no infants policy would prevent her from bringing her newborn. Our wedding would be completely Olivia-proof. We collaborated closely with our wedding planner to ensure these restrictions would be rigorously enforced. She assured us that the boutique hotel we had chosen as our venue regularly hosted adults-only events and had staff experienced in politely but firmly declining entry to anyone who did not adhere to stated policies. We discussed every potential scenario, including the possibility that my parents might attempt to pressure us into making an exception. The planner suggested adding password protection to all vendor communications to prevent unauthorized changes, a precaution that seemed extreme until I recalled how my mother had once modified my college application essays because she felt she knew better what admissions officers desired. With the venue secured and the rules established, we focused on the guest list. This was perhaps the most cathartic part of the process. Instead of the obligatory family invitations that would have dominated a traditional wedding, we selected only individuals who had genuinely supported our relationship. Ryan's parents and his brother topped the list, along with a handful of aunts, uncles, and cousins who had consistently treated me as part of their family. From my side, I included my father, extending him the benefit of the doubt that he might choose to support me independently of my mother's decisions. I also included 2 distant cousins who had always shown me kindness. My mother and Olivia made the list too, not because I particularly desired their presence, but because excluding them outright would have escalated the situation beyond what I was prepared to handle. The remainder of our guest list consisted of close friends who had celebrated our relationship from its inception, and colleagues who had become genuine friends. In our wedding planning sessions, we made a deliberate decision to omit any mention of pregnancy or babies from all aspects of our celebration. There would be no accommodations made for Olivia's condition, no adjustments to the timeline, no special meal considerations. Any traditional wedding elements that might allow Olivia to insert herself into the spotlight, like a large bridal party with a matron of honor role she might expect, were eliminated in favor of a simple ceremony focusing solely on Ryan and me. We chose to mail the save the dates exactly 1 week after the engagement party, timing that made the connection between the 2 events impossible to miss. The morning we planned to send them, I felt a fleeting moment of hesitation. Was this merely petty? Was I lowering myself to Olivia's level by orchestrating such a deliberate response to her announcement? Ryan sensed my uncertainty. This isn't about revenge, he reminded me gently. It's about establishing boundaries and creating a wedding day that authentically reflects us. You deserve to be the center of attention at your own wedding, Emma. His words reinforced what I was slowly coming to accept. that desiring my moment after a lifetime of yielding the spotlight wasn't selfish or petty. It was healthy. I addressed each envelope by hand, a task that felt almost ceremonial. With every name I wrote, I was consciously selecting the community that would witness and celebrate our commitment. When I wrote Olivia and Mark Thompson on their envelope, my hand didn't tremble. I felt calm, resolved. We drove to the post office together and dropped the stack of envelopes into the mailbox. As they slid from my fingers, I felt a significant weight lifting. Not just the physical weight of the cards, but the heavier burden of constantly accommodating others at my own expense. The wait for responses began. 3 days after mailing the save the dates, we received our first enthusiastic RSVP from Ryan's brother, Josh, who texted a photo of himself holding the card with a thumbs up and the message, "Already booking my flight. So excited for you guys." Other positive responses quickly followed. Friends who loved the concept of combining our wedding with a Greek holiday. Colleagues who appreciated the adults-only policy. Ryan's extended family members who immediately began researching Greek customs to incorporate into their attire or gifts. My father called 5 days after the cards went out, his tone confused rather than angry. "Emma, your mother and I just received your save the date. Greece in January? Greece in January? Don't you think that's going to be difficult for a lot of people?" His focus on a lot of people, rather than specifically mentioning Olivia, told me he was attempting to circumvent the obvious conflict. "Ryan and I want an intimate destination wedding," I replied calmly. "We understand not everyone will be able to attend, and we're completely fine with that." There was a long pause before he inquired, "And the no children policy? You know your sister will have a newborn by then, if she gives birth early." "The venue has strict policies," I answered, the partial truth coming easily. "And honestly, Dad, Ryan and I want a child-free celebration where all our guests can fully enjoy themselves without distractions." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother isn't pleased about this. She believes you're being inconsiderate of your sister's condition." I took a deep breath, steadying myself before responding. "This is our wedding, Dad. We're planning it in the way that feels right for us. I hope you'll be there, but I understand if you can't." The conversation concluded shortly afterward with my father promising to consider it. I hung up feeling stronger than anticipated. I had articulated my boundaries clearly and calmly, without apology or retreat. The die was cast. All that remained was to await the inevitable fallout. Ryan and I were enjoying a quiet Sunday evening at home, curled up on the couch with takeout and a movie, when my phone began vibrating insistently on the coffee table. Olivia's name and photo flashed on the screen, and Ryan paused the movie without me needing to ask. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something within me knew that postponing this confrontation wouldn't make it any easier. I answered the phone and had barely uttered hello before Olivia's voice erupted, so loud I had to hold the handset away from my ear. "What the hell, Emma? Are you absolutely serious?" Her words spilled out in a screaming tirade that made it clear she had been simmering for hours, possibly days. "You know I can't fly internationally when I'm 7 months pregnant. No airline would even let me on the plane. And a no infants policy? So even if I give birth early, I can't bring my baby? What kind of sister plans a wedding, knowing her own sister and niece or nephew can't be there?" I waited for her to catch her breath before responding, my voice deliberately calm and measured. "Hello to you too, Olivia. Yes, Ryan and I are getting married in Santorini. We're very excited about it." My controlled tones seemed to further enrage her. "Don't play ignorant with me, Emma. You did this on purpose. This is about the engagement party, isn't it? You're being petty and spiteful because you're jealous of my pregnancy announcement." And there it was, the familiar accusation that had shadowed me throughout our relationship. Any negative reaction to Olivia's behavior was invariably framed as my jealousy, never her inconsideration. "I'm not playing ignorant," I replied, feeling Ryan's supportive hand on my shoulder. "Ryan and I decided on the wedding that would make us happiest. That's what wedding planning is supposed to be about, right? The couple's preferences? There was a moment of stunned silence before Olivia shifted tactics. Mom is heartbroken. She's been crying for 2 days. Is that what you wanted? To hurt our mother because you're having some childish tantrum? The emotional manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. I'm sorry Mom is upset. That wasn't my intention, but Ryan and I are still having the wedding we want. I paused, then decided to directly address the unspoken issue. And speaking of intentions, let's talk about the engagement party. You announced your pregnancy in the middle of an event specifically celebrating our engagement, then literally said you were stealing the spotlight again. Olivia's scoff was audible through the phone. Oh my God, it was just a joke. Everyone thought it was funny except you. You're overreacting, as usual. Mark and I had just gotten the confirmation from the doctor that day. We were excited and wanted to share with family while everyone was together. It wasn't some calculated plot against you. The casual dismissal of her actions that had profoundly wounded me, ignited something deep within my chest. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I found myself unwilling to accept her version of events as the definitive truth. It wasn't a joke to me, Olivia, and it wasn't the first time. My entire life has been spent watching you take center stage at moments that should have been mine. My high school graduation dinner became about your college acceptance. My promotion celebration turned into a congratulations party for your engagement. Every accomplishment I've ever had has somehow become secondary to whatever is happening in your life. And our parents have enabled it every time. My voice remained steady, but I could hear the weight of years of accumulated hurt beneath the words. So yes, Ryan and I chose a wedding venue and date that would work for us. We chose restrictions that would create the exact atmosphere we want for our celebration. If that means some people can't attend, we're fine with that. The line went silent for so long, I wondered if she had disconnected. When Olivia finally spoke again, her voice had shifted from anger to a threatening calm. You know, if you do this, Mom won't come. She's already said she won't leave me that late in my pregnancy to fly halfway around the world for what's clearly intended as a slap in our faces. I had anticipated this threat, had mentally prepared for it, but it still stung. That's her choice to make, I said simply. Just like this is mine and Ryan's choice. Olivia's voice turned venomous. You're choosing your fiancé over your family. You're ruining relationships that have existed your entire life because you can't stand not being the center of attention for once. The irony of her accusation was so perfectly pitched, it felt almost scripted. In that moment, I recognized that nothing I could say would make Olivia see the situation from my perspective. She was too invested in her version of reality, one where her needs and feelings perpetually took precedence. This is my wedding, my choice, I said finally. You made yours at the engagement party. The silence that followed carried the weight of decades of unbalanced relationship dynamics. When Olivia spoke again, her tone was one I had never heard directed at me before. Uncertainty mixed with something that sounded almost like respect. I never thought you'd actually stand up to me, she said quietly. I didn't think you had it in you. Before I could respond, she ended the call. The aftermath was swift and predictable. Olivia blocked me across all social media platforms and ceased responding to text messages. My mother called daily for a week, alternating between tearful entreaties and angry demands that I alter our wedding plans for the sake of familial harmony. My father maintained an uncomfortable neutrality, unwilling to directly oppose my decision, but equally unwilling to openly support it. Extended family members aligned themselves, with most siding with Olivia, the natural outcome of years of family dynamics that had established her as the priority. Through it all, Ryan and I stood firm together. Each time I wavered, questioning if I was making a mistake by potentially fracturing my family over a wedding venue, he gently reminded me that healthy relationships necessitate mutual respect. something my family had rarely offered me. With each passing day, I found myself growing more comfortable with our decision and more confident in my right to prioritize my own happiness, even when it inconvenienced others. It was a lesson long overdue. 6 months later, I stood on a terrace overlooking the Aegean Sea, the January sun casting a golden glow over Santorini's iconic landscape. Despite it being winter, the weather was mild and clear, perfect for the intimate wedding we had envisioned. Behind me, our small gathering of guests chatted quietly as they took their seats for the ceremony. Ryan was somewhere inside with his brother, preparing for our first look. Everything had converged exactly as we had planned, though the journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. 3 weeks after the confrontation with Olivia, I had received an unexpected letter, actual paper mail, not an email or text message, from my father. Inside the envelope was a 5-page handwritten letter that commenced with the words, "I've been a coward, and I'm sorry." What followed was a painful but honest reflection on his role in enabling the dysfunctional dynamics between Olivia and me. He acknowledged how he and my mother had consistently prioritized Olivia's needs and moments over mine, not out of a difference in love, but because Olivia's more demanding personality had simply been louder, more insistent. "The squeaky wheel gets the grease," he wrote, and I never stopped to consider what that meant for the wheel that didn't squeak. The letter continued with specific memories, instances when he had witnessed the hurt in my eyes, but had chosen the path of least resistance by yielding to Olivia's demands. He expressed profound regret for the engagement party incident, admitting he should have redirected attention back to Ryan and me, instead of getting caught up in Olivia's announcement. Most surprisingly, the letter concluded with his promise to attend our wedding in Santorini, regardless of whether my mother and sister chose to come. "This is your day," he wrote, "and I want to be there to witness it, even if it means traveling alone." His letter marked the inception of a slow, tentative healing process. While my mother maintained her stance that she couldn't possibly leave Olivia so late in her pregnancy, and Olivia herself continued to feign my existence, my father and I began building a relationship independent of the rest of the family. We had weekly phone calls where we communicated more openly than ever before. He asked questions about my life and genuinely listened to the answers. He shared stories from his own youth that helped me understand how his family patterns had shaped his parenting. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Decades of established dynamics couldn't be dismantled in mere months, but it was a beginning. Ryan's parents were magnificent throughout this period. Linda called regularly simply to check on my emotional well-being, never prying for details, but always making it clear she was available to listen. Thomas utilized his frequent business trips to coincidentally be in our city more often, showing up with takeout and amusing anecdotes that provided welcome distraction. They never directly criticized my family, but their consistent support made the contrast between healthy and unhealthy family dynamics impossible to ignore. The wedding planning proceeded without further drama. Our Greek wedding planner handled everything with efficiency and warmth, sending weekly updates with photos of venue preparations and menu tastings performed by proxy. When we arrived in Santorini 5 days before the ceremony, every detail had been perfectly executed, down to the local wildflowers in our suite that matched our wedding colors. On the morning of our wedding, I felt a profound sense of peace. The anxiety that had accompanied every previous significant event in my life, the certainty that something would occur to diminish my joy, was noticeably absent. With Olivia literally an ocean away, there was no possibility of her stealing this spotlight. The ceremony itself was breathtaking in its simplicity and intimacy. We exchanged vows on a cliffside terrace as the winter sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I wore a simple silk gown that caught the breeze off the sea, and Ryan couldn't stop smiling as he promised to continue seeing and choosing me every day for the rest of our lives. When it came time for toasts at the reception, My father stood with visible nervousness. He cleared his throat twice before commencing, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. I've failed Emma many times throughout her life, he said openly, causing a ripple of surprised murmurs among guests unfamiliar with our family situation. I allowed patterns to persist that should have been broken. I missed opportunities to celebrate her uniqueness because I was too preoccupied managing someone else's needs. He looked directly at me as he continued. But watching her stand firm in what she wants and deserves has taught me that it's never too late to change those patterns. Emma, I am so proud of the strong woman you have become, often without the support you should have received. He then turned to my new husband. And Ryan, thank you for loving my daughter the way she deserves to be loved, completely and without competition. There wasn't a dry eye at our small reception as he concluded. To Emma and Ryan, may your life together be filled with moments where you both feel fully seen and celebrated. 6 months after our wedding, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Despite our ongoing estrangement, I sent a carefully selected gift, a beautiful handmade blanket and a children's book about the special connection between aunts and nieces. I included a simple note. Congratulations on your new arrival. Whatever has transpired between us, I would like to know my niece. When you're ready, I'm here. It was an olive branch extended without expectation, a signal that while I had learned to set boundaries, I hadn't permanently closed the door. To my surprise, Olivia sent a brief text 2 weeks later with a photo of the baby wrapped in the blanket I had sent. No words accompanied the image, but it felt like a step. My mother remained more resistant to the new boundaries I had established. Our conversations were infrequent and strained, each of us meticulously avoiding any topic that might trigger conflict. But even she eventually began making small gestures, remembering to inquire about Ryan's work promotion, sending a housewarming gift when we purchased our first home a year after our wedding, occasionally mentioning details from my childhood that indicated she had been paying more attention than I'd realized. The healing wasn't dramatic or complete, but it was tangible. The most significant transformation, however, occurred within myself, learning to stand firm in my own worth, to genuinely believe that my moments merited celebration and my boundaries deserved respect, fundamentally altered how I navigated the world. I became more confident professionally, more authentic in friendships, more open with Ryan about my needs and aspirations. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having preferences, for simply existing fully as myself. Reflecting now, I understand that what initially seemed like revenge, the carefully orchestrated save-the-date strategy, was actually the critical first step towards something infinitely more valuable: freedom. Freedom from patterns that had constrained me my entire life. Freedom to cultivate relationships based on mutual respect rather than ingrained historical dynamics. Freedom to define family not solely by blood, but by how individuals treated one another.
So, what is the takeaway from all of this?
I believe it's that sometimes standing up for yourself feels selfish only because you've been conditioned to perpetually place yourself last. Sometimes creating distance from toxic patterns feels wrong only because those patterns have been normalized throughout your life. And sometimes the individuals who react most negatively to your boundaries are precisely those who benefited the most from your lack of them. Have you ever had to establish challenging boundaries with family members? How did you navigate the aftermath? I would genuinely love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this narrative resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about navigating complicated family relationships and discovering your own voice. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's perfectly all right to create the life they desire, even when it might disappoint others. Thank you for listening to my story, and always remember, you deserve to be the main character in your own life.